Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, always known as Forum DX257, here to bring you another 1980s and 90s G.I. Joe tour review. And today I'll be taking a look at the massive G.I. Joe Arctic Assault Tank, the 1990 Avalanche, and its driver, Cold Front. Now, neither the Avalanche nor Cold Front make any comic book appearances, but the Avalanche tank makes its animated appearance in the 1990 animated first season episode Victory at Volcania Part 1, which is a bit of a cameo in the background. It makes a fuller appearance in Part 2. Oddly enough, Cold Front does not make any animated appearances, which is kind of odd because he is mentioned by name in the episode The No Zone Conspiracy. So he does exist in the animated universe. You just never see him. As a matter of fact, the Avalanche is often driven by Sub-Zero, an action figure which was just carded by itself. Kind of sneaky on Hasbro's part to split them up that way.
It might be a little bit difficult to see just how large this vehicle is, especially as it's an Arctic vehicle. They don't generally tend to be quite as big as this, but the Avalanche is over 16 inches long. As a matter of fact, I'll compare it to your standard 1982 or 1983 Mobat, which is around 11 inches long, and you can see that the Avalanche still dwarfs it. It's even wider and taller than a Mobat as well. Taking a look at the features, the Avalanche has a front cockpit which hinges open. The steering column actually moves out of the way so you can get the figure out. We've got some really nice cockpit detail here. On the left side of the vehicle, we have one missile launcher. It came with two of these missiles. And this is a spring-loaded missile launcher. Actually, one of the very first for the G.I. Joe line at this time. We'll just lock that into place. And then this circular tab, you press it forward, and it launches. The launcher itself can be maneuvered up and down like this. But one of the most interesting things is it's attached to a cannon, which is, again, only on the left side of the vehicle. The cannon itself can move up and down. It can even rotate on an axis like this. So again, the missile launcher has even more range, and now the cannon could actually move this way as well. It's not very intuitive, but it's actually very interesting nonetheless. On the right side, we have what's called the mine launcher. And the mine launcher swivels all the way around 360 degrees. And the mine launcher actually does have mines in it. And this is spring-loaded as well. On the back here, we have a slider here. And you just slide it forward and then flick it back. It came with 6 of these discs, which act as the mines. Behind that, and on both left and right sides, symmetrically for once, we have missile launchers. Now these are boxes which you pull up, and these actually ratchet. And you have 3 of these rockets in the inside. They're really well detailed. You notice these very odd triangular fins on the top here. And believe it or not, that's actually for your fingers. These are flick missiles, believe it or not. Kind of a dead technology when you consider that the same toy also has spring-loaded missile launchers. But that was the early 90s for you. Just to demonstrate, move the box up a bit. Make sure that this is loose enough for the flick, and just flick it off like that. In addition to all this armament, the Avalanche also has a deployable attack vehicle. You just raise up this antenna a little bit out of the way. This doesn't lock in or anything like that. It's just something that's articulated just for the fun of it, I think. But now you can pull this section out, and that's the attack craft. It's call it a copter on the blueprints, but just a generic attack craft term everywhere else. Some people also call this thing a hovercraft because it just has turbofans on the bottom here. Personally, to me, this thing looks like a glider, but however you want to play with this thing, it's really up to you. It certainly does have an aerodynamic design, so I can't really complain with that. It has an opening cockpit, looking very much like the cockpit on the Avalanche, in fact. This has a very well detailed interior. And just like the Avalanche's missile boxes on the back, this one has flick-fire missiles as well. You just pull this back, and then it angles up by gravity. And now you can use these as flick missiles as well. And here is the Avalanche as compared to one of the more recognizable large G.I. Joe Arctic attack craft, the 1985 Snowcat, which was remade several times in the G.I. Joe line. And as you can see, this thing is, well, this thing is just almost twice the size. And even though I love the Snowcat, really I do, but for all intents and purposes, it is a well-armed truck. The Avalanche, this thing is an assault vehicle. The enemy vehicle that the Avalanche would most likely come up against is, of course, the 1987 Cobra Wolf. Now, as you can see, the Cobra Wolf is, well, like the 1985 Snowcat, is about half the size of the Avalanche, but at least keep in mind that, yes, the Wolf is a light fighting vehicle. And when I compared the Cobra Wolf to the 1985 Snowcat, I said that in expert driver hands and gunner hands, the Wolf would probably be superior to the Snowcat with its probable superior speed and armament. However, I would have to actually argue that the Avalanche would trounce a Cobra Wolf. Again, the Cobra Wolf would probably have the advantage of speed and maneuverability over the tank portion of the Avalanche. But then you have the high-speed scout craft here, which could probably destroy it itself with its own armament, or even be a firing sight vehicle or scout vehicle for any enemy wolves. There's a tremendous amount of armament on this vehicle, and it's a tank as well. It's very well armored and will probably take a few hits from the Snowcat before going down. Because of how big it is, you would think that there would be spots for more figures. But there aren't any foot pegs on the surface here, and there is certainly a lot of surface. Taking this out and taking a look at the insides, which is actually detailed, and it doesn't really need to be. But you can see that there's no real seating. Again, there's no foot pegs inside here. And unfortunately, this just reveals just how hollow the Avalanche tank is. Yeah, it's very, very hollow. One interesting thing is that the thing has fake treads and, of course, rolling wheels. And personally, I think it rolls really well. Despite how heavily sculpted the treads are, they don't seem to really catch on anything, so that's a good thing. I mean, if this vehicle were in real life, it just wouldn't be engineered properly. It makes for a great toy. I mean, all these features are really great and fun to mess around with. And it gives a very unique look to the vehicle. But this thing is just kind of, I mean, it should be a central, if it's a tank, this main cannon should be a very central portion to the vehicle. It should be mounted like right here or something like that, rather than something which bangs into the cockpits. And then you have the mine layer, which is, I think, a really great idea, but it was implemented much better in the 1990 Cobra Rage vehicle, where it popped out of the back of the vehicle. That's kind of where you want to lay your mines, not off to one side. And the weirdest thing is, as I keep mentioning, the back portion of the Avalanche is quite hollow. They could have just made this chunk of the mechanism and place it right here so that you flicked it outwards and it deployed the mine discs this way. I mean, sure, it's nice having it, I mean, as a toy, I mean, it's nice having it up here where you can grab it and you can maneuver it quite easily with your hand. But when you think about it as a real-life weapon, this thing is right in the path of your missile box. If you don't have this elevated completely upwards, you know, your missiles are hitting a portion of your own vehicle. That's really weird. And now it's time for... Does a modern figure fit in it? As usual, I'll be using my 2009 Rise of Cobra Footloose figure as my example as a modern figure. I'll just sit him down in a... Oh yeah, he fits well in there. But does he fit in the attack craft? Now, mind you, the attack craft barely holds a 3 3/4 inch figure. The feet are just way right out here by the lip, and the head is right up here by the hinge. So let's see if the superior articulation of a modern figure can compensate for that. Yeah, he does kind of fit in there, doesn't he? The included driver, Cold Front, comes with 3 very small accessories. We'll take a look at his pistol first. It's very chunky. I don't think this is based on a real-world pistol, though. It does have a nice little spur hammer at the back there. And a flash hider or silencer on the front barrel. Yeah, that's interesting. And next we have the bane of G.I. Joe collectors everywhere, a microphone. Yeah. It's very, well, it's not very detailed, but it is unique in that it does have this kind of right angle to it, so you can't really mistake it for, let's say, the 1987 hardtops microphone, even though it is typically the same material, kind of a flexible white plastic. Next, I'm not really sure if this really counts as an accessory. Most people do count it, because his visor is removable, even though I don't think it was meant to be. It's certainly not glued in, because nobody I've talked to has one that doesn't just pop out quite easily. Even though this looks like it was just part of the design of his helmet and should have been glued in at the factory at least. In the same year that we get the box set of the Avalanche vehicle and Cold Front, the driver, we also get a carded figure for the Arctic environment, Sub-Zero. Of course, Sub-Zero makes an excellent co-driver for the Avalanche, or co-pilot, if you will, for the attack craft copter. But he's often associated with the Avalanche more than Cold Front is, simply because of the cartoon. In the Deke animated cartoon of 1990, he was often shown driving the Avalanche, and Cold Front was never animated, which is actually very strange. As I looked up Cold Front in the G.I. Joe Field Manual, Volume 2, and there is totally a animation control art for Cold Front. So I thought maybe this was maybe for the commercials for the toys, but no, there's actually 2 commercials for the Avalanche, and neither one of them are animated. So why did they go to the trouble of actually making control art for a character that they were never going to animate? Another very curious thing is, seems Russ Heath added a mustache here. That actually gives him a lot more personality than having that microphone in front of his mouth. But the actual action figure doesn't have a mustache. It's kind of got Zap syndrome here. I can kind of understand why Deke Animation went with Sub-Zero rather than Cold Front, because Sub-Zero actually is kind of colorful, and that's what you would probably want in a kid's cartoon. Besides, the blue actually does kind of go with the Avalanche's blue cockpits. Whereas Cold Front himself is, well, he has kind of earth tones on him. And considering they're released both in the same year, they're both clearly Arctic figures, but they don't really look like they go together, color-wise. Interestingly enough, prior to this, we also have the 1988 Blizzard. And now their color schemes actually go very well together. I would actually argue that, well, I would probably still use Sub-Zero as a co-pilot. He would also make a very good co-pilot for the Avalanche, just based on how closely his colors match Cold Front. If you do a keyword search on the G.I. Joe Avalanche, you're actually only going to get maybe the tank 20% of the time. 80% of the time, you're going to get this guy, the G.I. Joe character named Avalanche. He is a 1987 action figure from the Battle Force 2000 subline of G.I. Joe. And while it's not that unusual for Hasbro to reuse names in order to keep the copyright, let's say Ferret, Dominator, Airborne, those are all examples that just come to mind. But here we actually have maybe a reason to name the tank after the character. Because in the comic books, this character actually gets killed. And while he's killed in a 1991 comic book, and this is a 1990 vehicle, you can still kind of assume that maybe the vehicle was named after him in honor. Trying to find a complete Avalanche on the aftermarket is actually kind of a hard thing to do, even though I wouldn't say that this is a particularly high dollar amount item on the aftermarket. It's kind of obscure. And quite frankly, not a lot of people actually collect the 1990 and up vehicle, so they don't generally have a very high price value. But it is very hard to find one absolutely complete. You have 8 of those flick missiles, 6 of those mines, you have 2 of these spring-loaded missiles, only one of which fits in the launcher, the other one you just have to kind of have rolling around somewhere. I don't think a missing spring-loaded missile really matters as far as a display goes. But then you also have tiny little details to look out for, like the little piping on the side of the cockpit that can be popped off. The antenna can be popped off. And then there's these weird little cube-shaped bumpers on the front. They can get popped off and go missing as well. And then there's the figure. If you want a complete figure, well, that can be expensive, but again, it's not something that people are actively searching for, so his value isn't really that high. It's just very hard to find one with all those very tiny accessories. Now, there is a problem with this vehicle. And that's actually one of the reasons why I got one absolutely complete and for dirt cheap. And that is the fact that the plastic that they use for this vehicle is very easy to yellow. And as a matter of fact, mine was just so nasty yellow that I think a lot of people sort of passed this vehicle up, despite the fact that it came with a complete and utterly mint cold front figure. People just saw this yellow, nasty yellow vehicle and just went, no, that's not worth the price. To me, it was, because I used Retro Bright in order to clean up this vehicle. I mean, it's not 100%. There's still quite a bit of yellow on one side, but it's nowhere near the way it was when I first got it. So if you don't know what Retro Bright is, it's kind of like a whitening agent, kind of like hydrogen peroxide, but in more of a cream format. And one of the reasons why I use that is because, well, quite frankly, I didn't know if Cobra stickers even had Avalanche stickers. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't have had the Canadian versions, which are kind of hard to get. So I used a cream to go around the stickers very carefully, and it kind of worked out. If you want the formula to Retro Bright, I would suggest going on to fellow YouTuber Retro Blasting. They have a tutorial on how to make Retro Bright on, I believe, their Star Wars X-Wing Restoration Project Part 2. Pretty sure Melinda from Retro Blasting actually does a fairly good look at how to do Retro Bright on vehicles and such. Well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind-the-scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.